All right, so yesterday I told you about the filing cadre, the motives for forming the filing cadre, the motives for filing. So I'm going to tell you about some of the people that were in the filing cadre. Okay, it was Robert Pickell, Dan Hutcherson, a guy named Yarmo K, Masako, Kevin B. Brugman, Birgit Polyakov, and keep it, of course, myself. Yeah, so to be more specific about some of their complaints or some of the things that they were going through, one brother had, intellectual property that was being used in presentations that Lourdes was giving. I think they were OSDP presentations. So he actually spent years preparing his content, and they were using it, and it was on a contractual basis. They were being leased, something like that. And anyway, Lourdes, she used them outside of the contractual agreement, and then she misrepresented her intentions with the usage, and then didn't come clean or say sorry when she got called on using them outside of the contractual agreement. Now, I could be wrong about the essence of the gripe, but this brother had issued a formal complaint. And the reason why he was in this filing cadre is because at the end of his formal complaint, when he had listed out all of Lourdes' contradictions, really embarrassing lies, where in one email she promised one thing, and then in another email acting as though she never made those promises, so that she didn't have to be accountable to the fact that she went outside of the agreement. It was very frustrating for the brothers. Blood, sweat, and tears that it was his property. Okay, regardless of how he came about it and how much time he spent making it, it was his property, and she obviously set to using it in whatever way she thought that she had to do, which I assume was for making the project that she was working on, or that she felt responsible for, look the way she thought it should look, even if it meant that she could go outside or violate this brother and the agreement that they had. And the reason why I say it was embarrassing is because when I heard about the hearing, I heard that after the brother made his case and showed all his evidence, a lot of the people in Hyung Jin Im's inner circle, they were speechless, because her character is on full display in this guy's complaint. So there's nothing anybody can say. It's like everybody realizes that they're working with somebody who's really, I am trying to find a nice way to say it. And I don't even know why I'm trying to find a nice way to say it. I don't know why I feel the burden to find a freaking nice way to say this, because I didn't get that kind of concern from her. And I don't think this brother did. So I'm not even gonna describe what I think was being described to me. But it was a pathetic realization moment where you realize the person has conscience issues. Okay, conscience issues. All right, that I can say it sounds nice. She has conscience issues, deep ones. So the room is silent, and again, I'm hearing this, secondhand. The room is silent, and Lourdes herself breaks the silence with this question: "This meeting is going to remain confidential, isn't it?" So that was the climax of the entire effort for this brother to document and build his case and call all those inner circle people together and have this hearing over her behavior, because it didn't result in any punishment. Her behavior wasn't addressed, but in the end, her final request was honored. Her final request, which was to keep it confidential. So in the filing cadre, because this brother could share about his experience, other people started to realize that in their experiences, she has a very sophisticated secrecy game. So, by the time we get to later stages of talking about the whole court process. You know, she wanted a gag order, even though she wanted to violate it, but we're not there yet. So my point is to say that secrecy always was a big theme in her game, and but we're talking more than secrecy, because by the time the whole court process comes to an end, this desire for secrecy turns into a desire to control speech. Okay, so it's not just that she wants to do the things she does. She kind of knows that those things are embarrassing and don't look good, and she's into marketing, so it doesn't look like, you know, it's a good company if it's dishonest, right? And so she's you know, much like Biden, you know, doing dirt in Ukraine and trying to crush the story. So much like that, you know. So we realize we're dealing with that, and so, you know, when Hyung Jin says later that, you know, the court case is going to be a public spectacle, we were like, good, that really satisfies a key element of the entire chemistry here, because secrecy is such a sought after thing by Lourdes, that, you know, I personally was hoping that she could realize that she didn't have to live a life of secrecy, because, you know, people were willing to you know, work with her, and but she would have had to go through it in a massive way to realize that, you know, she would have to be at the mercy of the citizenry first in order to realize that she could live past being exposed for all these things. And I do think she did. She was amongst, you know, loved people. She was just terrified of, you know, being outed. Anyway, this was a big thing. So the court case itself was sort of like to help kill this extra fear that she had about being exposed. Anyway, we did talk about those things. One sister, she was kicked off of a Facebook group for, I think, supporting me in a thread. So she wanted to, I know she wanted to make an issue about that. All right. Her argument was that Lourdes cast judgment on me and cast judgment on her arbitrarily, and we're citizens, and shoot, she didn't even do anything. All she did was give her opinion, and Lourdes sort of figured out that she's supporting me, and supporting me is a crime in Lourdes' head. So this sister got kicked off for, I don't know, a few days, and she was livid. You know, she, in her mind, which I totally understand, if you have heavenly dignity, you're not supposed to be treated like that, especially after Hyung Jin was talking about upside down kingdom. So she had a case, and she had a motive, she had evidence. Another brother was contacted privately and threatened that he might fall into the same treatment that she had engineered against myself and Robert Pickell. She was coercing people, because the evidence is in the court filing, the document that's out there on the internet already. She was contacting people to get them to shut up about, you know, any kind of support. If they were supportive, be quiet. And if they could bring themselves to, like, actively fighting me online or even help defame me, she was recruiting people to do that. So when Dan Hutchison was supporting one of the ideas that I was floating about upside down kingdom and the era of church being over, Dan knew, because Dan is keenly interested in government issues. Okay, I'm not coercing Dan. This is not a political alliance between me and Dan. This is not, you know, me getting Dan on my side. We have a meeting of minds because, in principle, we agree in principle. So when she found that Dan was bolstering my position, she had contacted him and said, you know, threatening things to him in private message. Well, Dan was going to use that as evidence to show that she's threatening citizens for her own political purposes. Let me see. One sister, she had another slideshow concept. She has since, thank God, finished that slideshow, that entire slideshow, without anybody's assistance. But she was looking for feedback, and she was looking for some kind of an interest from Hyung Jin-im, Kook Jin-im headquarters, and she was a national, you know, leader over in Europe. But her status as national leader couldn't help her get an audience or a discussion or any kind of buzz going with anybody about her project, because she was snuffed and stonewalled by Lourdes. Now, we can only guess, and it would have come out in that court case, that Lourdes was already doing her own OSDP project, and she didn't want any competing divine principle content. That's speculation, but she was stonewalling requests to pass along communications from a national leader who Young Jim had prayed over as being the national leader. So this national leader was really salty that all of her efforts seemed to stop at Lourdes, who is the secretary of the World Mission Department. So, yeah. Of course, now Robert's situation was one where his problems with her go way back 20 years, because he's lived in Pennsylvania that long, and she still doesn't, cop to some of his, complaints or things that he tries to get her to respect his boundaries. And instead of, turning towards him and just really looking at him square and hearing him out, what it is that annoys him about her behavior, she just fights him in all kinds of ways. And they have this kind of history. Now, me and my wife had some experience with, conflict resolution. So I had taught Richard Panzer, guided him through conflict resolution process. And then I guess he taught Greg Knoll, but Greg Knoll, being, more trusted and not engaged in some kind of a conflict with anybody, stood in as a mediator. But Robert had the issue of going through these conflict resolution sessions with her, and not finding any closure for various reasons. At one point, she wouldn't go through the conflict resolution, and he also felt that nobody would ever find out about these conflict resolution sessions, because I believe Greg, to Lourdes' glee, agreed to never discuss what came out of the conflict resolution sessions. So if you're in an environment with her and she knows that it's never going to be outed, you never know what you're going to get. So it totally went against high noon concept. It totally went against transparency concept, because she's a public official. So Robert wanted to hash out some of the things that she had done to him in court as well, and I believe that he was attracted to the public spectacle angle as well. Not to, not for the malicious desire to embarrass her, but to really move the process along, because she uses secrecy to avoid accountability, and within the secrecy, she's able to escape the reality of what people would really think, how much they would really work with her, or cease working with her, or forgive her. She doesn't even allow that next step to commence. And in the process, because of that, we don't have a transparent government, because this particular government official works so hard to keep her behavior secret. Anyway, I think that's about it that I can remember. Oh, Gideon Rauchi. Gideon Rauchi was in the filing cadre, and Gideon Rauchi was also threatened. So, not unlike Dan, Gideon Rauchi was also threatened about being my friend. And so Gideon wanted to use court to exert his will pertaining to his rights and boundaries as an individual. I could be misrepresenting any of these people slightly, but this is what I can recall, honestly speaking. And I'm sure that if you were to talk to any of these people, they could tell you more. If they're not fully in the tank politically and don't want to represent how they truly felt back then, that's up to them. And if they want to trivialize what they were doing back then, because things seem to have changed over there at Sanctuary now. But anyway, that's up to them. I'm telling you, I might have missed a few motives here and there, but this was the filing cadre. It was very clear that she, she had this thing with the secrecy. Now, so we started having meetings in May of 2017, and when we could get the meetings going, we met maybe once or twice a week. We shared our individual stories dealing with her, and then we started to figure out how to mold those into a complaint using the Chattanooga Constitution as a contextual background, I guess. So you have to use what rights are violated if she did this behavior. Well, which right was violated. We did that kind of work, and yeah, this was the opening discussions in the filing cadre. So there was some kind of a buzz, there was some kind of a leak, because somehow the core staff of Hyungjanim found out that we were preparing a filing, and people like Richard Panzer and Tim Elder started mentioning, oh, I hear some filing is coming, and at that time, right around May and June, I had heard that one of those Thursday Freedom Society meetings had ended in Kukjinim giving his blessing to Lourdes to, quote unquote, this is what I heard, marshal in your troops, Lourdes. So he had given her some kind of permission to, I guess, exercise some next level of tactics against me. And I remember the next Sunday, since I had heard this from someone who was at that Freedom Society meeting, I was kind of looking at her to see if there was any change in her or anything different. And so I'm sitting at the round table, the table where Hyungjanim always sits, and this is after the service, and she's looking at me like a panther in the dark, just pacing back and forth about 5 to 6 feet away from the table. And she jumps in the conversation when I'm saying something to somebody else, and she sort of she launches some comment at me about how I'm wrong and I can't win, and she always tries to say that by going after her, I'm going after the king. So I'm pretty sure she said something like that because that's how she gets the justification that I should be fought. But most of those justifications are contrived, and the people that she's weaponized against me have to have adopted those contrived justifications because it's all air. I actually never heard anything that any of these people who weren't weaponized and mobilized against me, I never heard any actual real complaint with any glue to it about what I did. But the air of what I did is always around her. I must have done something because she doesn't like me. But so she was lurking back and forth, and she said something like, going against her is going against the office of Hyungjanim and this kind of thing. That's her protection. But if that was true, all public officials could say that, and then all public officials are beyond scrutiny, and that had to be addressed too. And I just scoffed at her and I said, hey, I'm ready for whatever you're ready for. And I knew that I was saying that, and as I was saying that, I know that Kukjinim gave her some kind of a green light to unleash some strategy against me. I later realized that this had to do with her enlisting the help of Jerry Haying and some other people. But that was May and June when we started those conversations, and the stage was being set in June with Kukjinim emboldening her to take further measures. I have no idea if Kukjinim knew the tactics she had already employed against people in the filing cadre, but for whatever reason, whether his arbitrary choice, picking his favorites, or purely him believing what she said about us, because she had to have justifications for people to not give us a platform, to not take our complaints seriously. Because I think ultimately she's afraid of being exposed, so she was willing to demonize us, and she spent way more time than any of us did with Kukjinim. And I just basically think that either he was protecting something that she was involved in, or he just, she's the squeaky wheel and she spends more time with him, so he's more inclined to guide her from their side, having more relationship with her. But also that day Cook suggested that I do two things: run for office or start a church of my own. And I realized that this was him trying to help her and her buddies who had bitten into the idea that even though I'm the youth pastor, I was the problem in the church. Now, you got to understand, this is the hysterical concoction of I don't Lourdes, okay? I'm just gonna say Lourdes. I could describe the type of woman that she is, but the idea that I'm the reason why people are not joining, okay? No, that made me a scapegoat. And even when I thought about that, the reason why people weren't joining is because the church era is over, and she had overpromised. She had promised Hyungjanim that something like some multiple of 144, like 114, some multiple of 144. They set as a goal for how many people would be blessed by that time, and it hadn't happened. Okay, it hadn't happened. The deadline was earlier that year, and it hadn't happened. And so, Big Mouth Jamal provides a plausible scapegoat. My big mouth is the reason why people are not joining, and I'm like, no. If you actually understood that we're in a new age, you would find the reason why people are not, enamored with that concept of church so much anymore. God certainly isn't. He's enamored with the idea of the development of tribal messiahs. Even Father says that in his final prayer. He doesn't even mention the church in his final prayer, but she doesn't want to hear that. And you got to understand that providentially, this conflict, the ignorance of these providential issues exacerbates already this like fallen nature where this meritocratic person lives and dies by her reputation outside of her house and is willing to go beyond what the original mind will let her do, and then employ tactics to freeze out people who will tell the world about what she did. So she was a seriously bad player she was perfect. It was slam dunk. She was very cavalier, so she had made many mistakes, and there was lots of evidence. And but in the end, you'll find out, what won out over even all of the evidence was her tactic of weaponizing, men who can't even who can't even be in a dominant position at home with their wives. And by boo-hooing in front of them and badgering them, they one by one, they cracked and became her minions. And, in an effort to, be like White Knight, they swung at the dragon, which was me. And the things that those men were willing to do is what, I'm going to be talking about later. But this started in June when she had gotten the pledge or the go-ahead from Hyungjanim, and he tried to assist her that very following Sunday by giving me some providentially sounding reason to go do two things: go run for office and go start a church, right? So this comes in later on when Doug Williams spooks Hyungjanim by saying, don't marry your kid to Jamal because he's going to start another church. And then so there's a lot of contradictions. If you have Hyungjanim telling me to start a church in June, and then you have Doug saying, oh, he's no good because he wants to go start a church. I wasn't thinking about starting a church, by the way. But there's no principle, and there's no accountability to their own allegiance with themselves. There is just the screaming of Lourdes Schwartz and the inability of men who, like I said, they can't even dominate their wives at home. They have to satisfy her, or else she doesn't let up. So, none of them have anything to say against me, not in my face. In order to sound like they have a good case against me, they got to keep it behind my back, which I gathered was happening. I don't know what to tell you. The lesson for people is you better get ahead of a Jezebel-type woman who will make turmoil everywhere and put her in her place early, because if she opens up these tactics where she weaponizes, beta males to fight on her behalf, you don't have politics. You don't have principle. What you have is actually is the spirit of that Jezebel being multiplied, the will of the Jezebel being multiplied, okay? And you can see that you can see that it hasn't died, okay, in the sanctuary. So when she dug those roots in, and those brothers, instead of burning those roots, let them germinate in their hearts, and they acted against me. Anyway, so I'm just talking about what happened in May and June, really. So, Cook and them telling me to start a church happened in June. And then we were preparing for the DP road trip. So that's really all that happened in June. Nope, there's one more thing. I had this debate on the King's Report with Tim Elder, and he was pretty serious about there not being any Chano Guk. And I was telling him that I'm a citizen of Chano Guk, and that wherever I go, that's where Chano Guk is. And my thinking is actually right and supported by Father's words. And his thinking comes from the fact that he did not reach the spiritual realization called eldersonship, or Father calls going beyond the paths of liberated authority. And Father said, if you don't open the realm of liberated autonomy, Chano Guk can't happen. So Chano Guk is based on the individuals passing the level of or the pass of liberated authority. Okay, but if people think that sounds too hocus pocus, they'll never have the faith to actually be quickened and receive that insight. And if they're not quickened, then the certain behaviors can't come out, and certain ability to defend yourself against people to manipulate you can't be activated. And so what happens is you're constantly manipulated, because the greed of people like Lourdes, or meritocratic people who want to just use you for their political ambitions, wins out. It's tremendous. It's tremendously intense spirit and appetite, obviously, when you look at somebody like Lourdes. But the guys who turned around and helped her, they didn't actually have a case against me. They just couldn't withstand her onslaught. And yeah, just because they don't stand in a place of ownership, willing to take the risk to be not liked, to protect their identity. So that's my opinion, fellas. But yeah, these are the things that happened in June. Tim Elder said there's no Chano Guk right there on his King's Report in June. And I said, that's ridiculous. So next time I'll talk about the actual start of the case and the first opening arguments that went back and forth and the implications. All right, this was the Filing Cadre, and this was May and June of 2017. All right, talk to you later. Bye.